the same idea that trade and new ideas are being shared and taken from point A to point B. And then you've got the image of the guy in the bottom left-hand corner, which is one of Holman's beloved characters. So I'll let him take the reign there.
Well, and I guess the first thing is I put a bunch of light bulbs up there because all of a sudden their ideas are opened up. The light has, or I guess the darkness is lifted. It's a new sunrise in Europe. And so Marco Polo is an important character to our story. And I don't know that they do justice about talking about him in the books and the things you're going to read. But Marco Polo, to make a long story short, is from Italy. He travels to China. So he takes, it's a long time. And he sits on the court of the Khan, who takes over and unifies China. And he sits on that court, and he is able to learn all about China. After approximately 25 to 30 years, he goes home to Venice. And when he gets back to Venice, Venice is in a civil war, and he's put in jail. And he happens to get a cellmate who is a writer. And he starts telling him the stories of what he saw in China. And he describes the cities as being made of gold, that the buildings were all made of gold and the city was made of gold. And this man wrote this down, and it became a book called The Travels of Marco Polo. Well, when Marco Polo writes this book, or he doesn't write it, but when it's written, there's a new invention of a guy you're going to come along, and his name is Johann Gutenberg, and he's from Germany, who created something called the printing press. And again, he gets credit for it, although there were printing presses in other parts of the world, including over here. There were printing presses, but they were slightly different. You'll read about Johann Gutenberg, and he publishes, they mass produce this book. And for the first time, Europeans think of, I guess I'll put it in the most positive way I can make it, and I'm going to change it to this color. They start to see this part of the world that way. They see some money over there and some wealth, and it's going to draw their attention. And that opens up Europe to more cultural diffusion. They want more. They're now, like we said in the quote, they're now living life to enjoy it to some degree. There's a middle class rising in Europe, so these people want goods. They want fine silks. Even the clothes Marco Polo's wearing are probably Chinese in that image. He's got silks, he's got jewelry on. So this desire for those goods, they've opened their minds. These light bulbs are going off all over Europe. They're going to be ready to go now.
Yeah. One thing that I just think it's a really, really interesting fact is that during the time of Rome, this item of silk was worth more than its own weight in gold, which I just think is really remarkable, and that it was valued that much and people were that interested in it, even in the classical age, which when we get to the Renaissance, we're talking about the rebirth of that classical age. It's ironic to me that there's a rebirth of the value of silk as well.
Yes, and I tried to put a little bank on there, that idea that there's a lot of money over there waiting for you. So they're going to try to find ways to get that gold. So that, I guess, takes our next slide.
Mr. Holman and I both were talking about this image and thought it was a good representation of the Renaissance, And I do want to just reiterate once again that the Renaissance is a French word for rebirth, and in this case, we're gonna use the analogy of a flower, and the entire flower itself is the Renaissance. The roots, the beginnings of that stems from the classical seed, or the classical age, referring to the Greeks and the Romans, and everything that the Renaissance is, in large part, is based off of the classical age. And I think we kind of jumped over this little piece, but that classical age, the information, the knowledge of that was saved by what group of people?
The Islamic culture.
So, there's definitely a thank you that needs to be deserved in that sense.
Right. The Library at Alexandria, for example, or libraries in the Middle East, basically stored many of the copies of Greek and Roman knowledge. And so they continue to build on it, as people died in the classical age, and Rome fell, and everything was burned, the Muslims continue to build on that knowledge and go deeper into math and look at trigonometry and do things at a higher level, while the Europeans were in that dark age. But I think that's that idea of the seed. It was the classical seed that was there. And if we're thinking of just Europe, if you actually try to envision this as being Europe, that seed was always in the ground, was always there. But during the Middle Ages, a few things maybe happened. So you had maybe the Crusades added another root, because all of a sudden they could see now that the world had something to offer. And, other things were happening that were kind of helping these roots to grow during the Middle Ages. But it's not until we get to this time period of the Renaissance where that flower bursts from the ground. And there were a couple of things that made that flower grow. Because this flower, this seed sat there for 1,000 years, maybe 1,500 years, and it couldn't grow. It couldn't expand. So something had to happen. And that is this idea here that comes in next.
So, in order for seeds to be able to grow, we need to have water. And as you can see from the image here, that the travel and commerce become that water that help let this flower, of this Renaissance flower, grow. And, when you have travel and commerce occurring, you have more than just the buying and selling of products. You have this idea, this exchanging of ideas, and what we refer to a lot of times as cultural diffusion. But probably most importantly for this concept is like I said, the exchange of the ideas and the knowledge that is really going to fuel the Renaissance and keep it moving from here.
Well, and that's an interesting painting you bring up, because that painting is the school of Athens. I'm sorry, and in that it's a Renaissance painting that is going back and looking at all the famous people. So in this case, you've got different famous people, Euclid, and all of these people are drawn in here because they're looking back to the knowledge of that time period. But I think the key idea you said is this is what's really watering the flower, is these new ideas and the new trade. And as it waters it, two things happen. Obviously, you get the tree that begins to grow. So you have some shrubs grow. But we need two more things, and I think we'll take this thing last, because it maybe is the most important. And we'll talk a little bit about this. How do you fertilize a plant? Today you drop fertilizer on the ground, and that encourages the plant and the roots to grow and to get bigger. Well, in this case, the growth of the city-state is the idea that governments develop. And the governments really did two things for Renaissance and the idea of art. First, they put money behind new ideas. Pardon me?
I was going to say paying for exploration.
Yeah, they began to pay for exploration, for people to explore. They want to find a new route to China, so they're not paying middlemen, and that's something we'll talk about later. And they also started to spend this vast wealth that people collected. There were bankers that were just collecting money. And they said, let's make where we live beautiful. And they began to commission. Now, it's a big word, but it basically means I have enough money to pay someone to build a statue in the middle of town, and I can let them work on it for a year, and I can pay them. So there was all of a sudden a surplus of money, some provided by the government and some provided by individual people, that allowed them to build something like David. Although David's probably not the accurate one for the beautification of the city, but that is the most classic Renaissance statue in the world.
Yeah, and it is definitely one of the major tourist attractions, even still today in the area.
It clearly is. And it's beautiful. They'll look at that as they go through the quest. And then I think that takes us to the last one, and that's this word humanism. We should know that no plant can grow without sunlight. And the sunlight is what provides the ultimate food source for a plant to be able to flourish. So humanism, simply put, is this definition that people began to focus on human abilities and human greatness, that they can do great things, is the way I like to view this. So there's this idea, and I guess we have to think of it that way. It's an idea. And it's an idea that kind of permeates all of Europe at the time. And that idea said that people can solve problems. So it's a turning away from the church. people begin to start to look away a little bit from the cross and start to think about humans' ability and what life is about when you're alive. And that's where your quote comes in. You know, this is a time when Europeans worried less about dying and concentrated more on living. So it's that simple philosophy all the way back to the classic world of there's beauty in life. There's beauty in what we do on a daily basis. And we should focus on that some and focus on enjoying the life we live. That is a major, major change from the Middle Ages, where life was a drudgery and it was terrible, and people were basically only looking to the afterlife. So, is there anything you want to add with humanism about that?
No, I mean, I think you kind of, the only other thing I was going to say, but I think you kind of hit it there on the end, was that, in the Middle Ages, every aspect of life revolved around the church. So it is a big mind shift in Europe, this idea of humanism, and it sparks so many things. Flowers are blooming here with art and learning. So these are some of the things that the beautiful things that come out of the Renaissance. There's also education, there's science, there's architecture, and all of those things. And you guys will learn about that as you go through. One of my favorite things to talk about and for you guys to learn about all year is the printing press. So you'll definitely get to hear about that soon, and I'm excited for you.
Well, because you said it, I'm going to comment. We need to make sure kids understand the church doesn't just disappear. The church is, it doesn't become totally unpowerful. And the church actually responds to humanism. They feel that it's such a threat to church power that you will read something called Christian humanism, where the church comes out and says, yeah, humans are great, but there's a Christian element to humanism. So they try to combat this idea of the power of the human. So you're going to see that too as we progress. So the Renaissance is a fascinating time, and it ultimately is the time that, as we sit here today and look at the world around us, many of the most basic ideas of American culture and culture that we lead are really born. They're really these seeds, and this tree has continued to grow. And this humanistic spirit has continued to lead us to where we are today. And I think with that, we're pretty much done for tonight. Do you think so?
Yep, I agree. Thank you.
All right. Well, good luck, kids, and hopefully you find the Renaissance an impressive, and actually, hopefully you just find it beautiful. The artwork is beautiful, so I hope you take some time to enjoy what humans are capable of creating. Have a good night.